Hello, and welcome to this California walking tour of Old Town Folsom. I'm Lynn Momboyce, and I've lived in California all of my life and have been exploring this state for decades. I love to discover new areas in my backyard and bring adventures as a hometown tourist to life in walking and driving tours. You may find a number of my tours at VoiceMap under Monterey Peninsula as well as Sacramento County. This tour begins at the parking lot for historic Folsom, near the corner of Riley and Scott Streets, and ends at the historic Truss Bridge. On this walking tour, you will hear stories about the history of Folsom and have the opportunity to visit museums, wine bars, restaurants, shops, and historic homes. Before we get started, let me briefly explain how VoiceMap works. It uses your location to play audio automatically at the right time and place. This means that I will be silent at times when I'm not giving directions or telling stories. Though if you ever feel lost, there is a map on your phone screen that shows your location and all of the stops on the tour. You can end the tour at any time by clicking on the arrow in the top right corner and restarting it at a later time using the resume button. So now let's get going. As you face the multi-story red brick building, turn to your left and walk out of the parking lot to Scott Street. Directly across Scott Street will be the Moose Lodge. Turn right on Scott and continue to the end of the block. While you walk, I'll begin the story of the history of Folsom with its earliest inhabitants. Before the Europeans arrived in Alta California with the Portola expedition in 1769, diverse groups of native people inhabited this land for thousands of years. The area around Folsom was inhabited by the Nisenan, who were part of a larger group called the Maidu. The Nisenan were hunters, gatherers, and fishermen, and their subsistence revolved around the seasons. They lived between Sacramento River and the Sierra Mountains. Grinding holes on top of granite boulders are evidence of their culture and can still be found nearby. At the onset of the gold rush era in the late 1840s, their population dwindled as miners and commercial activities displaced them from their food sources. There is more to this story, and I will continue weaving it together as we explore this historic gold rush town. Continue along Scott Street. Stop for a moment at the corner and look to your right at the 3-story brick building. Built by A.P. Thomas Construction in 2010, the Folsom Power and Lighting Building was the project of local resident and developer Doug Scalzi. Designed to reflect the architecture of the original Folsom Powerhouse, which was built in 1895, and to blend in with Folsom's historic character, this multi-use structure houses offices, retail, and residential space, as well as the Sutter Street Steakhouse. Now continue walking and carefully cross Sutter Street. When you get to the other side of the street, turn left and cross Scott. Climb the stairs to the sidewalk on the other side of the street, turn right, and continue walking up Scott. This residential area features some of the oldest homes in Folsom, many built between 1859 and 1900, when Victorian architecture was popular. And just like there are different hair or clothing styles, there is more than one Victorian home style. Stop here in front of the Cone Mansion. With its magnificent wraparound porch, decorative woodwork, and pointed tower, it may best be described as a combination of Queen Anne and Stick Eastlake styles. Queen Anne, the busiest of Victorians, is typically multi-storied with bay windows, a turret or tower, as well as a porch and balcony with decorative banisters. The Stick Eastlake's most distinguishing features are thin planks laid horizontally or vertically on top of exterior siding, and decorative scroll work designs near the roof line. This mansion was built in 1894 by Simon Cone, and although it is certainly unique, it is not the original home built here. The kitchen area, which sits to the back of this house, is the only remnant of the first structure built here around 1859. Polish-born Simon Cone arrived in California in 1856 and opened a general merchandise store on Sutter Street. Around 1874, Philip Cone, no relation but same last name, arrived in Folsom, Shortly thereafter, he met and married Simon's daughter Alice and went to work for his father-in-law. After Simon died in 1895, Alice inherited the house where she lived with Philip, who continued to run the general store. The home remained in the family until 1966, and the property was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1981. Now continue walking. At the end of the sidewalk, carefully cross the alleyway and continue straight. There is no sidewalk here, so walk in the street as close to the left side as possible. Keep going and look to your left. Built around 1859, this was the home of Edward Levy, a prominent Folsom pioneer who owned a saloon and cigar store downtown. With its small collection of well-preserved historic mansions, this area was known as Folsom's very own Nob Hill. At the corner, continue straight across Figueroa. When you get to the other side, turn right and cross Scott Street. There are no sidewalks in this area. Continue on Figueroa, staying to the left side but to the right of the white picket fence. Take a look to your left behind the white picket fence at the two-story Victorian. It is yellow with white and green accents. Stop for a moment in front of the gate to admire this private home. Built in 1881 by German native Jacob Hyman, he arrived in Folsom around 1860 and opened a dry goods store on Sutter Street. This store was run by members of his family until 1942. The Hyman home, with its rectangular shape, low roof line, and elaborate window hoods and surrounds, is classified as an Italianate-style Victorian. Now turn and look directly across the street at the two-story gray Victorian. It has white trim and horizontal sticks placed on top of decorative shingle siding. Folsom druggist, banker, and assay agent James Burnham built this home for his family in 1891. It is a combination of Queen Anne and stick Victorian style. The home was originally 2.5 stories, but a fire in 1974 destroyed the top floor. Walk a short distance and stop when the house across the street to the left of the Burnham home comes into view. This charming home, painted white with dark blue siding, was built in 1859. The home would be associated with many early Folsom pioneers, the most notable William Jarvis, a partner in the Natoma Water and Mining Company, the organization that provided water to area gold mines. Today it is known as Bradley House, named after its original builder, Cyrus Bradley, a bed and breakfast featuring 5 uniquely decorated rooms surrounded by a lovely garden. If I were to classify this as a Victorian of sorts, I might place it under the folk Victorian style, similar to a Queen Anne, with the porch and spindle work, but smaller and plainer. Now continue walking straight along Figueroa. You can't miss the brick Gothic Revival-style Landmark Baptist Church on your left. Stop when you get in front of it. This church was built in 1860 for the Folsom Methodist community. It was the first kiln-fired brick structure in Folsom. The cost at the time? $9,000. It also served as a Presbyterian church and for a few years as Folsom's high school. In 2010, it became the home of the Landmark Baptist Church. Continue walking straight along Figueroa, staying to the right side of the street this time as you approach this busy corner. I'll tell you more as you go. Religious services began in Folsom the same year the town was founded in 1856. That year, Reverend Dr. Frederick Hatch held an Episcopal church service in the town's Hook and Ladder Company Hall on the corner of Sutter and Wool. The following year, Father Quinn built St. John the Baptist Church at Sibley and Natoma Street for the Catholic community. At the corner, we are going to cross a very busy thoroughfare, Riley Street. Stop at the corner of this busy intersection. Take your time and watch for a break in the traffic coming from both directions. When it is safe to do so, carefully cross Riley Street and continue walking straight on Figueroa. Continue walking and stay to the left side of the street while I continue the story of early Folsom history. After the Native Americans, Gabriel Moraga would be the first European to explore the area. His father, Jose Moraga, second in command of the Juan Batista de Anza expedition of 1776, brought his entire family to Alta California. They would be among the first colonists to live in Yerba Buena, now known as San Francisco. Years later, in 1808, Gabriel led the first Spanish expedition into the Central Valley. They camped near what one day would be the town of Folsom. Continue straight. Across the street is number 714, the two-story neoclassical wood home behind the white picket fence. Once you've had a good look, continue walking to the corner of Figueroa Street. Built around 1864, this was first the home of Dr. Benjamin Bates and his wife Jeannie. Dr. Bates was the town dentist. After Bates, this home was purchased by Bill Rumsey. He owned the grocery store in town. At the corner, carefully cross Wool Street and keep going. Stop here on the sidewalk in front of the one-story white Italiante Victorian-style home with blue and gold trim. The name over the door reads Trinity House. This building was constructed in 1886 by Edward Christie, a miner by occupation, who also served as Folsom's deputy sheriff and Sacramento County supervisor. Today, this is Trinity House, the office for the rector and staff of the Trinity Church next door. This church was constructed for the Episcopal community during the early 1860s for approximately $4,000. Today it is recognized as the oldest house of worship still being used for weekly services in Folsom. Now turn around and walk back the way you came to the corner. At the corner, turn left and cross Figueroa. Then continue walking straight down Wool Street. Stay to the left and continue on Wool. We are headed downtown, where the families who lived in these homes worked. Arriving in 1827 to hunt along the American River, American frontiersman Jedediah Smith was the next person to leave his mark here. Attracted by Smith's reports of high-quality beaver furs, the Hudson Bay Company sent 3 expeditions to the area over the next half-decade. At the corner, carefully cross the alley and driveway ahead. Using the sidewalk, descend the steps, then stop when you reach the corner. Our next historical figure is West Indian immigrant William Leidesdorff. He arrived in the United States in 1834 and built a prosperous business in New Orleans. 7 years later, shunned by his father-in-law and fearing imprisonment due to the enforcement of the Negro Seaman Act, William, a biracial-free U.S. citizen, sold his business and left for Yerba Buena. There he became a Mexican citizen and was granted a 35,500-acre parcel near the American River called Rancho Rio de los Americanos. After gold was discovered near the American River, William's land dramatically increased in value. Unfortunately, he would not realize his plans for this land, as he died suddenly at the age of 38 in 1848. At the corner, turn left and continue straight. These first 4 buildings date to 1895 and constitute the most intact portion of historic Folsom. At that time, this was the location of a grocery store and a saloon. Today, they are a clothing store, ice cream parlor, and the town's oldest restaurant, founded in 1957, Hop Sing Palace. Named after the Chinese cook in the television series Bonanza, Bill and Lana Lamb purchased this restaurant in 1986 from the original owner and have run it ever since. Stop here for a moment. Look to your left. Do you see the storefront that's painted red? This is Crystal Basin Cellars and D'Artagnan Vineyard. In 1891, this was the location of one of Folsom's hotels, the American Exchange. Today it is home to Folsom's largest concentration of wine and tap rooms. In 2015, D'Artagnan was the first tasting room to move into historic Folsom. Bob and Bonnie Wrights own and run the operation. Their son Brandon is the winemaker. They serve a number of red varietals, all sourced from their family estate vineyard in El Dorado Hills, and share their space with Crystal Basin Cellars. Continue walking just a few feet. Next door, look for Merlot Family Estate Vineyards. Their varietals include Zinfandel Pinot Noir, Syrah, and Chardonnay, all sourced from the family vineyard in Northern California near the Trinity River. If they are open, feel free to stop in at any of these establishments. If you plan on being a while, you can close off the tour. When you're done, just come back to this spot and start the tour again by choosing Resume. Otherwise, continue walking along Sutter. Do you see the Wells Fargo Assay Office building on your left? Have a seat on one of the wooden benches in front of the brick building next door. I have a story to tell. It starts with Charles Palmer, a Yale University graduate who headed west to the gold fields in 1848. Not suited for mining, he tried his hand at a number of different professions: schoolteacher, mercantile owner, lawyer, but nothing seemed to fit until 1852, when he walked into Henry Wells and William Fargo's gold buying office in Sacramento and signed on as a Wells Fargo assay agent. In 1857, he transferred to the Folsom office and partnered with his brother-in-law, Robert Day. Their advertisement read, "Palmer and Day, assayers of gold, silver, and ores. Office with Wells Fargo and Company, Granite Banking House, Folsom." In April of 1860, the Palmer and Day Assay Office would also become the terminus for the Pony Express. At the time, the fastest way to get mail from the East Coast to California was 25 days by steamer. William Russell Alexander Majors and William Waddell felt that it could be done faster and established the Pony Express. The route? St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. 10 days by horse. Their advertisement read, "Wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellows, anxious for adventure, not over 18, must be expert riders and willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred." The Pony Express lasted 18 months before the transcontinental telegraph made the service obsolete. Today, only the facade of the Wells Fargo Assay Office exists. The original building was demolished in 1961 to make room for a gas station. Some residents had the foresight to salvage the front of the building, and later, when the gas station was ultimately not built, they used the reclaimed materials to recreate the facade that you see today. Those residents became the founding members of the Folsom Historical Society. Founded in 1961, they operate the Pioneer Village Outdoor Museum we will visit later, and the Folsom History Museum, which is the brick building to the left of the Assay Office. The History Museum is home to a collection of artifacts that chronicle the development and settlement of Folsom. There is a charge for admission. Before we leave this area, make sure to look for the Pony Express emblem on the front of the Assay Building and the California Historical Landmark plaque on the side wall. There is also a granite informational totem at this location. This one recalls the history of the Pony Express. Continue walking along Sutter. To your left is the Fat Rabbit Public House, a great place for British grub and brews. Back in the 1890s, this was the location of the Natoma livery. Before the advent of the automobile in 1910, a livery was essential to every American town. Besides selling hay, grain, coal, and wood, the livery provided boarding for horses and wagons. At the corner, carefully cross Decatur and continue walking along Sutter. Stop at the corner in front of the Central Valley Commercial Bank. During the 1890s, this was the edge of town and the location of the Chinese laundry and blacksmith. Developer Jeremy Burnell completed this mixed-use project known as Sutter Court in 2007. Turn to your right and take a look across the street. The 3-story brick parking garage with the clock tower is another one of Burnell's projects, also completed in 2007. It is part of the multi-phase railroad block redevelopment called Historic Folsom Station. Both structures are similar in style to the Folsom Electric Power and Lighting building we saw on Sutter at the beginning of this tour. These commercial projects were architecturally designed to fit in historically with this quaint Gold Rush era town and serve as modern bookends to Folsom's historic district. Continue walking straight along Sutter. Stop here for a moment and look to your left behind the chain link fence. This is the Chan house. It will be in some state of restoration. Howard and Mabel Chan moved into this home in the 1920s. Howard was the son of Oak Chan, who emigrated from China as a teenager during the gold rush and became a leader in Folsom's vibrant Chinese community. In 2017, this home was donated to the Folsom Historical Society. Their goal? To restore the home and open it as a Chinese heritage museum. It has a way to go, but if you have any interest in this effort, contact the Folsom Historical Society. Now, do you see the 2 benches and the CNC market sign up ahead? Walk over there and stand near the sign while I tell you about Folsom's namesake, Joseph Folsom. Born in 1817 in New Hampshire, Joseph Folsom graduated West Point in 1840 as a second lieutenant. In 1847, he arrived at Yerba Buena, was promoted to captain, and served at the Army's military depot. It was here that Folsom became acquainted with William Leidesdorff and his land holdings. After William's death in 1849, Folsom traveled to the West Indies where he located William's mother, Anna Spark, and promised her $75,000 for the title to her son's real estate. There is evidence that William only paid Sparks a first installment of $25,000 before he returned to Yerba Buena. Then things got a bit complicated. In 1850, as gold continued to be discovered on the Rancho Rio de los Americanos land grant, William's West Indian relatives challenged Folsom's purchase. At the same time, California, now a state, challenged Anna Sparks' right to transfer the property to Folsom. Though the property remained mired in litigation for years, ultimately Folsom won and retained ownership of the land. But just like William Leidesdorff, Joseph Folsom would not realize his plans for this property, as he also died suddenly at the age of 38. The year, 1855. In 1856, executors of Folsom's estate changed the name of Granite City to Folsom and auctioned off his property for over $1.4 million. With the majority of the lots in town sold, 3 hotels opened, and the Sacramento Valley Railroad 22-mile line connecting Sacramento to Folsom completed, this growing gold rush town would soon become the center for stagecoach and train lines running between Sacramento and mining camps throughout the area. It would be almost 100 more years before Folsom would finally be incorporated as a city in 1946. Now continue walking across the parking lot of the Folsom Telegraph Building. Stop when you get to the end of the parking lot. Turn and face the building, making sure you are out of the way of cars using the lot. This building is the home of the 4th oldest weekly newspaper in California, the Folsom Telegraph. Established in 1856 by physician Dr. L. Bradley, it was originally called the Granite Journal. Dr. Bradley described Folsom in his lead editorial this way: "For the last 2 weeks, we have been in a state of confusion, packing up, moving, and rearranging our press, and as yet we are scarcely settled. We now commence in the bustle of this new city. Our town is situated on the left bank of the American River, in the heart of a rich mining region. On the 20th of February, we counted businesses and found them to number 259. From appearances, we should judge that the number of inhabitants couldn't fall short of 1,800. The Granite Journal name was changed to the Folsom Telegraph in 1857 and has had a number of owners since that time. Today, it is part of the Gold Country Media, which publishes several community newspapers. Pick up the latest edition in the rack in front of the office. It's free. Let's continue. Look to your left and you will see a crosswalk. Use this to cross Sutter Street. I'll catch up with you when you're across the street. When you get to the other side of the street, stop and look to your left. Do you see the rectangular granite monument? This is a state historical landmark marker. Walk over and stop in front of it. This marks the location of California's first passenger railroad, the Sacramento Valley Railroad, a 22-mile stretch of track connecting Sacramento to Folsom. Its inaugural run was February 22, 1856. Now look just past the marker toward the light rail station. Do you see two more bronze markers? The square one is a monument to William Leidstorff, denoting this as Leidstorff Plaza. The circular one is a trail marker for the Pony Express. Walk over to the planter that stretches between these two markers, and I will tell you the story of the first steam railroad west of the Rockies. Our story begins in 1852 with steam schooner captain Charles Wilson. In his travels on the Sacramento River, he noticed endless wagon trains running from the river to inland mining towns. This he envisioned would be the perfect place for a railroad. In 1852, Wilson reorganized the unsuccessful Sacramento, Auburn, and Nevada Railroad into the Sacramento Valley Railroad. Theodore Judah was hired to survey the land for the railroad, which he issued in April of 1854, along with these written comments. This whole country is impregnated with gold, and it is not at all unlikely that the excavations for this railroad will discover many rich claims. 1854 would be a busy year for Judah. Besides the railroad survey, he lobbied Congress for a transcontinental railroad, and he accepted employment with Joseph Folsom to survey the town of Granite City, a planned community which would eventually become Folsom. Construction on the Sacramento Valley Railroad began in February of 1855. Over the course of the next year, Joseph Folsom would die unexpectedly, Granite City would get a name change, and the Sacramento Valley Railroad would make its inaugural run between Sacramento and Folsom. On that first trip, guests piled onto the locomotive Sacramento. 6 flat-roofed passenger cars filled with honored guests and dignitaries were followed by a number of platform cars for the general public. Then the whistle sounded, the engine roared, smoke spewed, and the Sacramento rocked forward to the sound of loud cheers. 1 hour later, traveling at a top speed of 25 miles an hour, it rounded the bend, sounding its whistle on approach to Folsom. In 1898, Southern Pacific purchased the Sacramento Valley Railroad. Passenger train service ended here in Folsom in January 1939, and Southern Pacific discontinued all commercial rail services in the 1970s. In 2005, the Folsom Rail Yard opened once again, this time as the terminus of the Gold Line, the Sacramento Regional Transit District's light rail. All right, let's get going again. Walk back to the corner where you originally crossed Sutter Street using the crosswalk. When you get to the corner, use the other crosswalk to cross Redding Street. Turn left on Redding Street. To the right will be a construction zone surrounded by a metal fence. Stop once you get to the end of the fence. This is the future site of Granite House, the next phase of Jeremy Burnow's historic Folsom Station project. Once it is built, it will reflect the look of an elegant Gold Rush hotel. Now take a look ahead and to the ground. Do you see the railroad tracks embedded in the sidewalk? Turn right and continue walking, following the railroad tracks that are just to the left of the construction area for Granite House. There will be a line of granite boulders lining the railroad tracks. Stay to the left of the boulders and follow the track toward the center of the plaza and the train turntable. Stop here for a moment in front of the railroad turntable. 1 year after the railroad arrived in Folsom, this rail yard was built to support the line. By the 1860s, it included a depot for passengers and freight, a car and machine shop, a freight warehouse, engine house, and turntable. The first of 5 turntables was installed in 1856. It was cumbersome to operate, taking 4 or 5 men to turn. As locomotives grew in size, the turntable was replaced, the last one installed in 1910. 3 years later, a Y-style triangular track replaced the turntable, and it was dismantled. The city of Folsom purchased this block from the Southern Pacific Railroad in 1990 and began restoring the rail yard. During revitalization, excavations revealed remnants of prior turntables. In 1997, a replica of the second table, the 1867 A-frame, was built on top of the original site and remains the centerpiece of this plaza. During the holiday season, the turntable area becomes a community ice skating rink, with the town Christmas tree trimmed and staged in the center. Now take a look to your right. Do you see the building with the Scott's Seafood sign? It is a semicircular brick building, built in 2020 over the location of the 1869 four-stall Folsom Roundhouse. This is another piece of Jeremy Burnow's historic Folsom Station project. It has two tenants, Scott's Seafood on the first floor and Williamette Wineworks on the second. Wineworks is a unique experience where customers become the winemaker, tasting, blending, and crafting their own individual cuvée. All right, it's time to get moving again. Walk to your left around the turntable toward the amphitheater. I'll meet you there. Continue walking toward the amphitheater and follow the railroad tracks just to the left of the theater. Opening in 2012 as part of the train yard revitalization process, at least one concert, play, or civic event is scheduled to take place here every month. Continue walking and stay to the left of the amphitheater. Take a look to your left. Do you see the red Southern Pacific caboose? Walk over and stop outside the black iron fence next to the caboose. This is Pioneer Village, a hands-on outdoor living history museum that allows visitors to experience 19th century pioneer life, such as panning for gold or watching a blacksmith at work. This free museum is run by the Folsom Historical Society. I will point out the entrance at the next stop. Continue walking straight, keeping the black metal fence on your left and the Southern Pacific passenger train car to your right. Stop when you get to the end of the black iron fence. This is Wool Street. Take a look to your left. There you will find the entrance to the Pioneer Village. If you are interested in visiting this museum, you may close the tour now. When you're done, come back to this spot and start it again by choosing Resume. Otherwise, turn to your right and walk to the entrance of the Folsom Railroad Museum, which is inside the Southern Pacific passenger train car. This small museum has a few educational displays and historic photographs, as well as a few books for sale. As you face the Folsom Railroad Museum, take a look to the left of the museum. This is the Folsom Passenger Depot. The sign over the roof apex reads Folsom. Walk over and stop in front of the entrance to the depot. This standard design Southern Pacific Railroad combination freight and passenger depot was built in 1914. Today it is home to Folsom's Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center. To the left of the depot is a public restroom. For a moment, imagine yourself here at the rail yard in the 1860s. Crowds gathered twice a day to meet the steam locomotive arriving from Sacramento, which carried visitors, merchandise, newspapers, as well as the mail. Stagecoaches lined up in rows along the street, waiting to transport visitors on to their next destination. Towns with names such as Mormon Island, Dry Town, Hangtown, and Rattlesnake Bar. All right, that's enough daydreaming. With the visitor center behind you, walk back to the sidewalk, turn right, and continue on Wool Street. Keep going straight and take a look to your left across the street. Do you see the large mural on the side of the brick building? This represents 150 years of Folsom history. Created by Michael Stanford in 1999, it depicts Joseph Folsom and Theodore Judah, as well as some of Folsom's well-known landmarks, the Rainbow Bridge, Powerhouse, Assay Office, Prison, and more. At the corner, turn left and cross Wool Street, then turn right and cross Sutter Street. I'll meet you on the corner in front of Snook's Chocolate Factory. Climb the stairs and stop here for a moment in front of the door to Snook's. During the late 1800s, this part of the block was home to two saloons because you could never have enough of those. Today you'll find Not Too Shabby, a home accessory and antique store, and Snook's Chocolate Factory. Candy makers John and Janine Snook opened this store in 1963. Currently, it is run by the second generation of Snooks, Jim and Renee. By now, if the door is open, the mouth-watering scent of chocolate should be driving you crazy. Stop in and try one of their candy creations, as everything goes better with a box of chocolates. Otherwise, continue walking up Sutter and I will point out a few businesses as you walk. To your right is Sutter Street Taqueria. In the 1880s, this was Burnham's drugstore. We saw the Burnham family home on Figueroa earlier. Next door, in the red brick building, is Roman's Jewelry. Roman, a Swiss-certified watchmaker, opened this store in 1995. He carries a fine array of current and vintage jewelry, watches, and clocks. Stop for a moment in front of the Sutter Street Theater. Now in its 14th season, they feature a variety of productions from comedies to musicals. This brick building was constructed in 1897 and in 1908 housed the first Pacific telephone switchboard in Folsom. In the 1850s and 60s, when buildings were first constructed along Sutter Street, they were built of wood and canvas. These quite regularly became kindling for fires. As the buildings were rebuilt, they were replaced with the brick ones you see here today. This went a long way to solve Folsom's frequent fire issues. Now continue walking along Sutter. Just past Wee Olive, where you may sample California fresh olive oils and balsamic vinegars, and Alice's Coffee Shop, stop and look for the red brick building. Today, this is the home of Snyder's House of Jade, but back in 1869, it was Jacob Miller's furniture and casket making business. After casket making proved more lucrative, Miller became a full-time undertaker. Today, Miller's mortuary remains in the family, relocated a few blocks away. Continue walking straight. Stop here outside the Folsom Hotel. Originally the New Western Hotel, it was built in 1885 by German immigrant Charles Zimmerman. Giuseppe Joe Muir purchased the New Western in 1925, completely redid the interior woodwork, and changed the name to the Folsom Hotel. Today, this is a restaurant serving gastropub food and craft beers. Now walk a little further to the white stucco building to the left of the hotel on the corner. Joe Muir built this around 1926. It was the location of his Associated Gasoline Station and liquor store, which he ran along with the hotel until the 1940s. Italian-born Joe was a trained carpenter. He came to San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake to help rebuild the city. In 1921, he moved to Folsom, purchased land at the south end of town, and built his home there. It still stands today on a court named after him. All right, we are going to cross Sutter and walk down the other side, back in the direction of the train depot. Walk to the corner. You will probably have to wait your turn for the traffic light. While you wait for the traffic light, look diagonally across the street to your right. J. Wild's Livery and Feed restaurant is a tribute to John Wild Livery and Feed Stable, which anchored this corner in 1902. Use the crosswalk to cross Sutter Street to the other side, then turn left and continue along Sutter. While you walk, imagine yourself back in the late 1800s, sharing the road with horse and buggy. Sutter Street would have been dirt. Dust or mud, really. In the distance, you might hear honky-tonk piano tunes resonating from saloons. Or a train whistle. Must be the afternoon train from Sacramento. Since the 1850s, Sutter Street has been the heart and soul of Folsom. And while store tenants have changed over the years, it still reminds one of the American Old West. Take a look ahead near the edge of the sidewalk. Do you see a tall, white granite totem? These informational totems describe different aspects of Folsom history. Walk over and stop near it. The building you are standing in front of is called the Gaslight Building. The name originates from the early 1960s, when in order to compete with the local shopping malls springing up outside the historic district and entice shoppers back to Sutter Street, quaint lamps reminiscent of gaslights were added to the downtown district, which was then called the Gaslight Mall. Now look to the right of the Gaslight Building, to the small white stucco building with a tile roof and bell tower. This was originally the Folsom Firehouse. Today it is aptly named Firehouse Gifts. In 1857, Folsom was the third town to establish a volunteer fire department in California. The Folsom Hook and Ladder Company housed their buckets and ladders in a shed near the train depot. During those early years, the town was plagued by numerous devastating fires. Even the Hook and Ladder building burned down. In 1932, volunteer fire chief Joe Muir built this firehouse across from his hotel. The fire department remained staffed by volunteers until 1970. The totem you are standing by discusses the evolution of Sutter Street from a dirt road with horse-driven carriages to the Lincoln Highway, one of America's first cross-country highways. I will tell you more about this transformation later on this tour. If you're interested in shopping, wine tasting, or revisiting any of the stores in town, now is the time to do so, as we will be leaving town shortly on our way to Lake Natoma. You can close off the tour while you do so. When you're done, just come back to the spot and start it again by choosing Resume. Otherwise, continue straight ahead to the corner of Wool Street. Turn right and continue down Wool. While you walk, I will expound on the evolution of Sutter Street from dirt highway to part of America's first transcontinental highway. Sutter Street was paved in 1915, linked to a pre-existing highway, and just like that, the Lincoln Highway connected San Francisco to New York City. The name changed to Highway 50, and as long as it followed Sutter Street, Old Town's economy boomed. But that would not last. In 1949, the highway was rerouted to bypass Sutter Street, and residents were drawn away from Old Town to big box stores and shopping malls. To avoid ghost town status, Jeremy Burnell proposed the multi-million-dollar historic Folsom Station project, and Folsom City Council committed $34 million in property taxes to redevelopment. Historic Old Town Folsom's rebirth is ongoing, but with the farmers market, concerts, and at least one festival every month, it truly is a happening place. Continue straight to the corner. Stop for a moment at the corner. Look directly across the street. That is the Lake Natoma Inn, one of two hotels in Old Town. The other is Bradley House, which we saw earlier on this tour. When it is safe, use the crosswalk to cross Leidesdorf Street. On the other side, turn right, and continue walking on the pedestrian and biking path. Stay to the left and watch for bicyclists. Continue straight. Up ahead, you will cross Gold Lake Drive. Stay on the walking path. It will veer to the right and then to the left. Just keep following the path. Our next stop is the concrete bridge over the Folsom Powerhouse forebay. While you walk, I will tell you about the powerhouse. This story starts with Horatio Gates Livermore, who came to California in 1850, seeking what everyone else was seeking at the time, gold. By 1861, he realized that he could make his fortune more easily by securing water rights on the American River. His plan was to harness the water of the American River and transform Folsom into a manufacturing center similar to his native New England, where water wheels had long been used to operate factories. To realize this plan, in 1864, Horatio, along with his sons, purchased 9,000 acres of land along the river and controlling interest in the Natoma Water and Mining Company. By the mid-1860s, construction began on the dam and the canal, which was central to their plan, and then labor costs thwarted their effort. In need of cheap labor, Horatio approached the state of California. He offered to donate 350 acres of his land for the construction of a new prison, which would relieve the overcrowding at San Quentin, California's only federal prison. A deal was struck. In exchange, he received 30,000 hours of prison labor. Well, more delays continued to uphold the construction project. Horatio passed away in 1879, and his sons took control of the business. The dam and canal were finally completed in 1893, but logging proved to be unprofitable for the younger Livermores, who then turned their attention to a new vision, Instead of water to power manufacturing, they would generate hydroelectric power to create electricity. In 1892, they created the Sacramento Electric Power and Light Company for just that purpose. There's more to this story, but you're getting close to the concrete bridge that crosses the forebay. Also, if you look to your right, you should see the parking lot where we began this walking tour. Now up ahead, this path crosses the concrete bridge. Stop about mid-span on this bridge. Stand near the left side of the bridge so that you're not in the way of bicyclists. Now look to your left. This is a reconstruction of the Folsom Powerhouse Forebay Reservoir. It was here that the water was held before entering the intake gates to the powerhouse. Behind the gates, you're able to see the roofline of the 1895 powerhouse. We're not going to the powerhouse on this walking tour, but if you're interested in seeing this as well as the museum, both are accessed about a quarter mile further ahead on this path. Now remain here for a moment while I continue with the story of Horatio Livermore's sons and their Sacramento Electric Power and Light Company. In 1895, the Sacramento Electric Power and Light Company would become one of the first alternating current hydroelectric power stations in the United States. Using General Electric's design for their powerhouse and utilizing the rushing waters of the American River, their system pushed water through the forebay to turbines which connected to generators, created electricity. In July of that year, the powerhouse generated electricity that spanned over 22 miles to downtown Sacramento and lit up the Capitol building. It continued to supply electricity to the area until 1952. In 1958, the site was donated to the state of California for a park, and it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1981. Now continue straight to the end of the concrete bridge, then turn right and follow the wooden walkway to the traffic signal. Use the crosswalk to safely cross Riley. Turn left and use the crosswalk to cross Scott Street. We are coming to the end of our tour at the Truss Bridge, but make note that the parking area where we began this tour is up the hill on your right. Continue walking straight along the walking and biking trail. Stay to the left side and watch for bicyclists and follow the signs to the historic Truss Bridge. Up ahead are signs for the Johnny Cash Trail. Continue walking while I tell you about the trail. This 2 3/4 mile Class 1 bike and pedestrian trail winds northeast toward the Folsom Prison. Eventually, it will feature sculptures celebrating the life of Johnny Cash. Cash wrote Folsom Prison Blues in 1953. The single was so popular among inmates, they requested he play at the prison. He performed 2 shows at Folsom Prison on January 13, 1968, and his Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison Live album was released later that year. Folsom State Prison is the second oldest prison in California. It opened in 1880. Now, while you walk, take a look across the street. That is the entrance to the historic powerhouse and museum. Now, as you continue walking along this path, I'll tell you one more story. This one is about the California Gold Rush and its connection to Folsom. It starts in January of 1848 with James Marshall and John Sutter, partners at a sawmill in Coloma along the American River, 20 miles northeast of Folsom. While overseeing construction of the mill, Marshall noticed something shiny beneath the surface of the water. Sharing his find with his partner, the two realized they had discovered gold. Almost overnight, mining communities popped up along the American River. Settlers staked their claim and hoped for their fortunes. Mormon Island, one of the largest, grew to a population of 2,500 by 1853. Today, its ruins are covered by Folsom Lake. And there were others that made up the Folsom Mining District: Mississippi Bar, Negro Bar, Texas Hill Diggings, and Chinese Diggings are all covered by Lake Natoma. Beans Bar is under Folsom Prison, and Alabama Bar under Folsom Dam. Initially, claims were placer mined, a painstaking process of sifting through sand and gravel to find gold. At the end of the 1800s, bucket line dredging had replaced placer mining, a method that continued through the first half of the 20th century. Now continue straight. Up ahead is the truss bridge. Its pin-connected metal components allow for it to be easily assembled or dismantled at any time. It was originally built here in 1893, which might explain the interesting rules posted above the center span, which read, $5 fine for driving over this bridge faster than a walk, $25 fine for driving more than 20 head of horses, 50 head of cattle, or 200 sheep, hogs, or goats over this bridge at any one time. Now continue walking about midway onto the bridge. While you walk, I will tell you a bit about it. In 1917, the Rainbow Bridge, which is to your left, was completed as a replacement for this bridge. With the truss bridge no longer needed, it was dismantled and moved in 1931 to span the Klamath River, where it served proudly until 1998, when it again was no longer needed. The city of Folsom saw this as an opportunity to bring the truss bridge home. In 2000, it was once again dismantled and this time reassembled back on its original 1893 stone abutments. It now serves as a unique walking and biking alternative to the Rainbow Bridge. If you look to your left, you will get a view of the Rainbow Bridge as well as kayakers and paddleboarders on the American River. Looking to your right, way in the distance, is the Folsom State Prison. This is where I'm leaving you. And just as a reminder, the parking lot where we began this tour is back at the corner of Riley and Scott. We passed this location about 10 minutes ago. I do hope that you have enjoyed your tour of historic Old Town Folsom. I would greatly appreciate it if you took a moment to rate this tour or leave a comment. You can find more of my walking and driving tours by tapping the Explorer tab, then selecting Sacramento, Monterey Peninsula, or Santa Cruz. I hope you will join me again soon on another tour. There's just so much to discover here in California. Until next time, happy adventures.
This is where